Hello everyone, welcome to day 3 of Frontend Development Bootcamp. My name is Raj, and previously we have talked about HTML, how we can implement HTML tags and how we can create a HTML page with the help of HTML tags like HTML, head tag, body tag, and there are a lot of things. So today I'm going to talk about CSS. So what is a CSS? We use CSS for designing the web page. So let's say we can create a web page, we have h1 tag, and then we can write a paragraph. So let's say I'm creating a paragraph, this one, and I will save and I'll read out this one. So this is a heading, and this one is for the paragraph. And if I want to design some the paragraph, let's say color, or maybe we can add some background, we can do that with the help of CSS cascading style sheet. So how we can implement CSS in our web page? So you can use CSS in three ways. First is inline CSS. So inline CSS means like we have to use style as an attribute. So this here, every element you have to pass style as an attribute. This attribute for we use for the inline CSS, and here we need to define the CSS property. So let's say if I want to color, I want to change the color of this particular paragraph, so I'll use the property name is color, and then we need to pass the value. So how we can use, so this is a property name, and then we need to define a property value. So we have to use colon symbol, and then we need to define a property value. So this is how we can use the CSS property. So this is a CSS property for the color, and it will change the color of your paragraph, and you need to use style as an attribute for implementing inline CSS. So I'll just reload this page, and yeah, it's red color. So you can also change the color. So let's say if I want to change the color, so for this particular h1, so we have a color code. Here you can mention the hex code, or you can directly mention the color, let's say blue, red, green, whatever you want to do. So this is the color we have implemented. Now we have another way. You can write internal CSS. So this one is internal CSS. So how we can implement internal CSS? So I'll just remove this one part, and I'll just remove this one part because this one is for the inline CSS. So how to implement internal CSS? You just need to use style as a tag. So this is a style tag, and inside this particular style tag you need to write your CSS property for your HTML document. Okay, so this is the example for internal CSS. So how we can do that? So let's say I want to change the color of h1. So here we have written h1, and then we need to use this symbol curly braces, and here we can define a property. Let's say color is equal to blue, so it will change the color of the heading element. So let's say I'll just copy this one and I will paste it here, and here let's say here I'll write this one is CSS example or demo, whatever you want to write. So this is CSS example, and yeah, so every h1 tag the color will be blue. Okay, but this is not a good approach. So if I want to change the color of this red h1, and if I want to change the color of this, so we want both h1 tag having a different color, so we need a id as a concept. So this is a part of CSS selector. So how we can do that? So here we need to define id. So let's say here we have a id as a title, and here you can define an id as a subtitle. Okay, so I can remove this part, or you can comment this logic with the help of this symbol. Okay, and you need to close this one. Now we need to define an id. So let's say I want to write the CSS logic for this particular element whose id is title. So how we can do that? First we need to use hash symbol because we are working on id as a CSS selector, and then we need to write the id name. Okay, and then we will write the this symbol, the braces, curly braces, and here we can write a logic. So let's say I want to use for the title, I want to use brown color, and similarly I want to work with subtitle. So I'll just copy this subtitle part, not here, here. Okay. So we can change the color. So we can change the color. Let's say this one, and yes, it's working. Okay, so there is a one more concept, like we can use id as a css selector, where we can change the indivisible element or the design part. Okay, now we have one more concept, like we cannot define the same ID of multiple elements, because this is not a good approach, because like in the real example, like in the college, we have a unique registration ID for the every person or every student. So similarly, we want in our HTML, so we want there will be a unique ID of that particular element. So how we can write the how we can write the reusable css code. So we have a concept for the classes, like we can create a class. This class is for the content, and we can use this class for multiple times. Okay, so we can how we can use the class in the styling part. We just need to use dot symbol and the class name. So we have a dot symbol and then class name. So here we can write a class. So let's say I want to change the color, this one chocolate, and I will save and then reload. So chocolate color is done. Okay, so CSS classes is reusable, and ID is only for the single element. Okay, uniquely. So we can do that. We can write here, here, whatever we want. We can do that. So this is how we can implement CSS selector. So the first one is ID. So ID we use for uniquely identify the CSS or HTML DOM element. So this is a HTML element, and then we can define a CSS property with the half of the hash symbol. If we are working on the dot as a class, so we have to use class, and then you need to define a class, and then you can write the class CSS property. Okay, so then we have a third approach we can use. You can go for the external CSS. So how we can do that? So for the external CSS, you just need to create separate files. So I'll creating a file style.css. Okay, so this is a style.css. So what I'll do, I'll just cut this logic, this entire logic, and I will paste it here. So this is the external CSS file, and I will remove this part, and you need to link this CSS file with this particular page. So how we can do that? You need to use link as a attribute HTML tag, and then we need to define the attribute where we have a relationship is equal to style sheet, and then you need to define, you need to use href as an attribute, and then you need to mention the name of the file. So we have a name of the file is style.css. So I'll just save, and I will save here and reload this page, and it is still working because our style is linked. Okay, now like in CSS we have a lot of properties. You can check out the properties on the documentation. So I'll recommend you to go to the w3school.com. So this is a w3school.com, and here we have a tutorial for the CSS. Here you can check the lot of properties, like if you want to change the color, if you want to add the background, if you want to add some border. So I will go some of the properties of CSS. Okay, now I'll create a div section. So let's say this is div. Inside div element, I have created a paragraph. So let's say a random value is this one. Okay, so now I'll create a class. So let's say I'm creating a class. Name is this one is we can consider as a box, and here we can write the class as a content. Okay, and I can remove this part because this one is for the tutorial. So here we can remove this ID, and this is a CSS file. We have linked this particular CSS file with this particular line of logic. So we have a link as a HTML element, and then we have a relationship, and then we have connected the CSS code. Okay, so we have two class. So first class is for the box. So for defining a class, we have to use box as a class name, and here we can write a logic. So similarly, we have another class for the content. So I'll write another class for the content. Okay. Now, for example, if I want to, I will save and I will reload this page. So it's working. Now I want I want to add the background color of this particular div sections. How we can do that? So we have a CSS property for the background color. So here we have a background color as a property. Here you can define the background color. So let's say I'm defining a background color as a blue violet. Okay, so I'll save and I will reload this part. So it's working. So we have a div section, inside we have a paragraph. Okay, now also we can change the color of the text. So right now by default text is black color, so we can change the color of this text is equal to white. So how we can change the color of the text? With the help of color property, and then we can define the name value. So we have a value as a white. So I'll just reload the page. It's working. Okay, also we can define the background color for the content. So we can define the background color for the paragraph. So we can do that. So let's say yellow color. I will save and then reload this page. It's working. Okay, or we can remove, we can add, let's say orange red. So it's working. So now I'll talk about CSS box model. So like we have a two property in CSS box model. First one is for the margin and second one is for the padding. So margin we use for the outer spacing. So let's say this is a div section and we have some space from outside this particular div section. So this is a like space, and from the top and from the right and from the bottom. So if I want to add some outer spacing, so we can use the concept of margin. So we have a margin property. Here you can mention the value. So let's say I want to add some margin as a 15 pixels. So 15 pixels is from top, bottom, right and the left. So I'll just save and then reload. So this is a 15 pixels from the left, top, right and the bottom. So here you can also increase the value. So let's say 55 pixels. So we have 55 pixels from left, right, top and bottom. If you want to add some internal spacings, you just need to use the padding as a property. So we have a property name is padding. So here you can mention the value. So let's say 20 pixels. So I'll just save and then reload. So we have a div section having a background color is blue violet, and then we have a paragraph which has a background color is orange red, and then we have added internal spacing as a padding is equal to 20 pixels. So this is a one more CSS property that we can use for designing purpose. So now I'll show you, I will create a card. So how we, or now you can also add the border. So we can add a border. So let's say this is a box class and this is the background color is blue violet, and I want to add border. So first we need to mention the border width. So let's say border width is equal to 5 pixels, and then my border is a solid line, and then we can mention the color. So we can mention the color, let's say this one orchid, and then reload this page. So we have a border here. So we have a border, and this one having a width is equal to 5 pixels. You can increase this width is equal to let's say 10 pixels. You can do that. Okay, now what I want to do, I can add some radius from the border. So you can use the property border radius. Here you can mention the value. So let's say 8 pixels from top right. So we have a corner bottom radius. So we have 8 pixels. Okay, so there are a lot of properties. You just need to explore the properties. So we have covered border, margin, padding. You can define the static height. So let's say if I want to define the height of this particular div element, so we have a property has a height. So we can pass the value, let's say 350 pixels. So I'll save and then reload. So we have a height of this particular div section is 350 pixels. So you have to explore this particular uh, like CSS properties, and you can do that. So now, like I'll create, I will remove this entire logic, and I will remove this again entire logic. So I will create a interactive HTML card. So first we will create a div section. So inside div, like we can add a class, let's say card, and then we have a like two sections. This one is for the image. So here we can add a class, let's say this one is for image, and another div section is for the content. So here we can add a class content. Okay, and then we have a third section is for the actions. So here we can add a class action. Okay, so we have create I'm just want to implement the card. You can go to the website, let's say developers.google.com. So we have a cards, so you can create a this kind of cards with the help of CSS. I'll give you the demo how we can do that. So we have created this type of logic. So like we will create a class for the card. So we have a class for the card. Second, we will create a class for image. So we have a class for image. Third, we have a class for the content. So here we have a class for content, and then we have a class for actions. So you can use this one. Okay. Now, what I want to do here in the UI, we have some, like if you could zoom this particular link, so we have some border and then border radius, so we can do that. So if this is a card. Here we can define the static heights. Let's say static height is 350 pixels. Here we can define a border. So here we have border 1 pixels, and you can mention the color codes. Let's say I'm mentioning the color code as E0E0. I will save and I will reload this page. So we have a static card, this one having a height is equal to 350 pixels, whose width is equal to 100%. So I can define a static width. So we have a width as a property. Here we can mention the width, let's say 200 pixels. So we have a card having a width of around 200 pixels, or you can do that 250 pixels. So this is a card. Okay. Now we can also add some like this one is a body. So here we can define a background color for this particular body. So here we have a body section. Here you can define the background color is equal to, let's say, silver. I'll save and then reload. So we have a background color as a silver, and then we have a card, and and here we can define the background color, let's say white. So yeah, it's working. Having a like this one is as a border. Now what I want to do, I need some radius for the border. So here we will write border radius, and here you can mention the radius value 8 pixels. So it's working 8 pixels. Okay. Now what I want to do in the image part, here we need to add image. So here I'll just use image tag. Inside src you need to pass the URL. So let's say I want to use this particular image, so I'll just copy this image particular path URL, and I will paste it here. I will save and just reload this page, and within a few seconds you will be able to see the image. Okay, now it's working. Now in the this particular part you have some this particular heading, so you can do that. So now in the content, here we can define a paragraph. Here you can pass the value, and here you can define the class. Let's say class is equal to title, and here you can mention the title as a class or title. Okay. Now I will save, and here I will save and then reload this page. So it's working. Now what I want to do, so here we have a contain as a class. So just for the testing purpose, I'm adding a background color as a teal for the understanding purpose, or violet. So we have this one. So we can add some margin because in this card we have some space from the left and the right. So we can do that. So here what we do, we can add a margin. So we can add separately margin from the left. So we can add, let's say, 8 pixels from the left, margin right, 8 pixels from right. Save and then reload. So we have some margin from left and then right. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, I need to increase the font size because the font size is too a little bit large. So here, this is a title class. Here we can increase the font size with the help of font hyphen size as a property. Here you can mention the value. So you can also use percentage symbol. So 100% is by default value. So I want to increase the value of 120%, means 100 like 20% extra font size. So I'll just save and then reload the value. So it's working. The font size is little bit large. Now we can remove this particular content and then save, and it's working. We can change the color of this particular part. So here we can write a color property. So let's say color is equal to blue, and yes, its color is blue. Okay. Now what I want to do here, you can write some text. So I'll just copy this particular path, and here in the content part you can add a paragraph. So let's say this one is paragraph. Here you can write a class, let's say content text hyphen content as a class. Okay, so this is a class. Here we can use this particular class. So I'll just copy. Here we can write the class for this particular logic. So I'll save and I will reload. So we have image and then we have a content, and right now the height of the card is static. So I'll just remove this particular path because the height is static. Okay, it's working fine. Now we can increase the width. So let's say increasing the width is equal to 350 pixel. So it's working. Now it's working fine. uh, like in the UI we have to create a button, so we can do that. So like this one is for the action section. Here we can create a button in the HTML. So here we can add a class. Let's say class is equal to button. Here we can pass the value as a C mode. Okay, so here we will define a class. So here we can define a class. Like we are not working with the action part, but yeah, we will work it. I'll save and then reload this page. Okay, so like there is a some like space, and then we need to perform some space. So we have a class for the content. We have a margin left and right, so we'll copy this particular logic here also. So I'll save and then reload. So we have some margin from the left, and here in the button we can also, here we can write margin bottom, uh, also 8 pixels. Save and then reload. So it's working fine. Now we can design this particular button. So right now there is like no background color. So how we can do that? So I'll just use background color is equal to white. Save and then reload. So we have a no background, and then in the button, so we have a border. So we can remove the border. How we can remove the border? So I'll just use border as a property, and then we need to pass the value as a 0 pixel. That's it. So there will be no border. Okay, we can change the color. How we can change the color? So we can change the color, let's say I want to change the color as a blue. So I'll just save and then reload. So we have a color is equal to blue. Now pointer has gone, so we have another property how we can define a pointer. So we have to use pointer as a class, cursor as a class is equal to pointer. So this is a CSS property you can use, like you can define a cursor as a pointer. So I'll just reload. So we have this one. Now I need to implement some hover effect. So there is some hover when I just over like move to the mouse over this particular button. So we can do that with the help of hover effect. So how we can perform the hover effect, like you are working on the same button, and then here you need to write hover colon hover. Okay, here you can define the like property. So I'll just copy the same path, I will paste it here, and when I like move mouse over the button, so I want my color of the background color of the button will be this one, and I want to add a border is equal to 1 pixel solid, the color code the same color code blue, and we want some radius, so we'll use border radius is equal to 8 pixels, and the color of the font of the button will be white. I'll save and then reload this button. So it's working. So you can do that with the help of CSS, how we can achieve. So here we can pass the value, let's say 5 pixels, and just reload the page and it's working. Okay. So this is how you can design the card, and I'll suggest you to go for the CSS property. These all are the properties, and these all are the extra properties. You can do that. So I have given an idea about CSS, how we can implement the CSS, the like classes ID, and so many things. And like in this particular bootcamp, we will work on the basic like CSS classes and the properties and the ID part, and mostly we will work on the bootstrap part. And in upcoming video, I'll share the video for the bootstrap. So thank you for watching. See you in the next video.